the Commerce DevCast, Episode 1, Adobe Commerce App Builder and SaaS for eCommerce. Hello everyone, this is the very first the Commerce DevCast, a show where we explore the technical evolution of e-commerce, the business impact of tech decisions, and the direction our industry is heading. We are three Magento and Adobe Commerce developers with over 40 years of combined experience. We work across enterprise projects, open source initiatives, and agencies. And we have all contributed to the Magento core repository and volunteered there as the maintainers. It means we are not just an observers, we have helped to shape the platform in a way it is right now. Why this podcast, right? What is it about? We are launching this podcast to share knowledge and perspective with three core audiences. The first one is the merchants, of course, who are evaluating or already running Adobe Commerce or Magento open source. Developers who are navigating evolving tech stacks and best practices and trying to survive here. And of course, agencies who need to align strategies, delivery and platform choices in the changing ecosystem. Our goal is to keep it real trade-offs and real impacts and real projects. We'll share our experience and our thoughts. So meet the hosts, me, Vlad Podorozhnyi, moderator. I'm a software architect and partner and runner through GmbH. And I've spent the last decade working on a complex e-commerce and Magento 2 solutions, from architecture to delivery. I've contributed to Magento Core on a volunteer basis and worked closely with both merchants and development teams. What really drives me is combining deep technical expertise with the project management skills and staying tightly connected to the customer needs. Oleksandr, please, you.
Thank you very much, Vlad. My name is Oleksandr Kravchuk. These days I'm heading the Magento department at Navigate. I'm in general almost 10 years experience working with Magento products. I started with Magento 1 and then Magento 2, the commerce of many names, but I think the one word that unites all them is Magento. I'm certified Adobe Commerce developer, business practitioner, and architect master. Also have a subject matter expert awards done. I also, as Vlad mentioned, contributed a lot to Magento 2 core code base. I was one of the key contributors to the multi-source inventory in-store pickup feature, the Magento core. And in 2020, I was recognized as Magento Master Maker. I worked with businesses of very different size, from very tiny small web shops to the huge multinational corporations with a really crazy turnover. No matter the scale, I think the thing that drives me is to find this tiny sweet spot that's provide you the elegant technical solution that actually can provide the real business value for the merchant there.
Vitalii, what's about you? Who are you?
Yeah, I've been working with Magento for 9 years. Also started with Magento 1. Also contributed to Core as you guys, to MSI. Now I'm still contributing, but mostly concentrated on Magento PHP Storm plugin, which I hope every one of you using and enjoying. Yeah, interesting question rise up just during this conversation. What drives us? And I believe what drives me the most is saving projects. I don't know why exactly this, because before I thought working with legacy sucks, but when I happen to work with really messy project, when have a lot of, let's say, flows, yes, and getting rid of all the not necessary code changes, let's say, and not best practices, covering everything with tests, and making this messy, old, slow project up to standards, I really enjoy doing this. Yeah, this drives me. Now, besides commercial work, I also trying to having good life-work balance. I also have a lot of different hobbies like cycling. That's about me.
That's great. I have a point about the fact that you're enjoying the legacy code.
No, I'm not enjoying the legacy code.
You're enjoying the legacy projects.
I enjoy saving
them, making them not so legacy as they was before.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the point is, when you are for a long time in a situation where you need to dig shit a bit, you're starting enjoying it.
I don't know how it works, but I really was afraid. I was afraid of it, but after years, when you look back and remember how bad the project was and how good it is now, it's really
Good.
it's fulfilling. It's like you done something tangible, and that's really brings happiness, I would say.
A bit of dopamine from this.
Yeah.
Well, this
I could understand. I could relate.
I'm usually compare it with working like a dentist. When you have a problem with your tooth and you need to somehow cut the rotted part, save what you can, and save preserve full functions just to refactoring it and reconstruct it. That's
touch only small piece or a big piece that makes problems and keep the system still working on the fly. Let's start talking about why we are here, right? We are here about the Magento, about Adobe Commerce. We are talking about the innovations that Adobe is making, about the community innovations that are made here in the Magento world. So we have a couple topics, and one of them that we have wanted to discuss is the Adobe App Builder. How developers feel about it? What the hell is this? How to use it? How to not use it? What are pros and cons? And all the thoughts that we have about it, right? So it's our thoughts. That's not the source of truth in the last instation, right? But we have some experience, and we may say how is it going and what could it influence the merchants. Oleksandr, maybe you could start that. Don't you mind?
Well, yeah, I can start it because I've actually thought about it, and I found that there's in the world of e-commerce having the different platforms and the many good products on the market these days. I'd like to compare these products with some kind of vehicle, basically that can drive from point A to the destination B. And I thought about it, and I found that Magento, it looks like a track. That's the old good. This monolith Magento is like a track. Yeah, it's can be expensive in maintenance, but it can carry anything you want it to carry. So it can just make your job done. At the same time, we could think about, for example, shopware, which is mostly some maybe Volkswagen sedan, just made in Germany, can drive good, but if you want to take it something massive, that's will cause you some issues. WordPress, well, I think that this is some kind of very old car that you are just driving because, well, for some reasons you don't want to change it. Either you love it or you just cannot afford anything better. But it's can work. Shopify, and I think that BigCommerce, it's mostly like a plane, but you don't own the plane, you own only seats, and plane, just flying somewhere high in the clouds. And here we have a kind of transition from Adobe Commerce in comparison to Magento, because I cannot tell that Adobe Commerce is some kind of a bigger track, because it will be wrong, just because Adobe Commerce, in comparison when it was just a Magento company and when Adobe acquired it and it developed, it's just totally two different kind of products. Now it's more, I think it's more like a Zeppelin. It's just huge, full of, let's say, air, that could have even own clouds inside, and it's allow you to do really great and big projects within this infrastructure. So in general, the idea is very nice because it's allow you to work with it as a platform as a service. That they position it as a PaaS. And there is really a huge difference between for example, the Shopify and the Adobe Commerce. As Adobe Commerce, you are actually owning the whole this Zeppelin, you're owning the whole infrastructure, and you're also taking responsibilities for it. So in the general terms, the difference between the, let's say, good old Magento open source approach and application builder is how you can extend things. So in Magento open source, you don't have any other way except that create an extension and this write the PHP code, the tons of XMLs with different kind of configurations. There could be some UI, there could be some endpoints, GraphQL, REST API, whatever. But it still remains that you need to create some project in the directory and upload it to the same kind of folder with your Magento, and then somehow with CI/CD deliver it to the production, and it will work. With App Builder, Adobe Commerce give you two ways. Here, first, you can use the same old good Magento open source way just to build a new extension and work with it. Another way that you can create your own separated instance that will be hosted separately. This will be separated application. It won't be related to it won't be hosted within the Magento instance. And you can provide your framework to communicate between these two instances. And this is the most valuable part. So in these terms, we are having two different ways of approach. We can customize Magento by just adding new modules, continue growing the code base. We can customize Magento, or Magento is wrong, it's not the term for this, Adobe Commerce, by introducing new applications that will be, let's say, within this Zeppelin, and you can use it with having your Adobe Commerce Pro. And this is the biggest difference, and this explains like why application builder, App Builder.
Yeah, they have so many builders nowadays,
That's true. Yeah, that's...
So I also have a couple of thoughts about that, about the App Builder. You're totally right. So Magento, the old Adobe Commerce platform as a service thing, right? It's more or less like a truck, the lorry, the big thing that can do everything that you need. And I really like a comparison with the other platforms. About the App Builder, that's really interesting approach that was running around the e-commerce and technology for quite a while. I think like 10 years already. It's so you have a couple separate applications that communicate with the API, and you are supporting each of them separately, and you have a lot of security breaches in each of them that you need to manage, and so on and so on. But yeah, that's the downside. The big pros of using the App Builder, as I see, you're not changing the default logic that Magento provides. You're not changing anything there, because Adobe Commerce developers, the Magento developers back in the days, have tried to isolate each part of the Magento, each module, as much as it's possible to make sure that there will be no side effects if you change A, that B will not gonna be changed, right? If you go and change the customer account functionality, the sales order functionality should not be changed, but that's not always the case, to be honest. And they have tried to fix that with them covering everything with the tests, unit, integration, functional tests. That was one of the parts of the solution. Second part was the introducing the composer and decoupling the dependencies, the DI, dependency injections things. But still, we have situations sometimes that are different parts of the system are tightly coupled, and that's bringing problems. And if you change A, the B could be changed again as well. That happens when you are developing the extension inside the platform. That's why I need to be careful. That's why I need to think about many various side effects. But if you're going to use the App Builder, you will going to rely only on the API that are provided by the Magento. And you cannot change the API within the App Builder. You can use what is already there, what is well tested, what is well performed, right? That is super covered with the tests. And that provides the higher probability of that your Magento, your Adobe Commerce will going to keep working in the way it is. And you're going to have just a side of the functionality that you're supporting there. And that's it. It's not influencing the Magento directly. It's just the API. That's it. It's just an integration. You cannot break your Magento with this App Builder. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's a great benefit. The downside, the cost. I saw the presentations from the last big Magento event. I don't remember what was that, Magento Live? Or don't you remember, guys? The last event with the screenshots, with the presentations. Anyway, they mentioned that Adobe SaaS and App Builder things in combination will gonna make the costs down, which I not agree with. I hope you also not agree with me as well, but I don't think it will be down. Unless we're talking about the super, super huge companies that have no idea how to manage their Magento website, and they have messed it up. They have messed the Adobe platform as much as it's possible, and they have no idea how to properly figure out and work with that. Then maybe the fully rebuilding it and introducing the App Builder and SaaS will gonna bring the benefits. Those are my thoughts. Vitalii, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm still trying to embrace what a builder is and what's the purpose of it. So far, I get to the assumption that this is actually the way how Adobe gonna integrate commerce processes with the whole infrastructure. So App Builder, it's not about e-commerce. It's something bigger than e-commerce itself because it provides you ability to integrate with Adobe Marketing, Adobe, oh my gosh, analytics, Adobe content management, like providing assets, providing CMS. So there are a lot of benefits, but the biggest question here, whether your particular project gonna leverage it. Because when it goes, for example, about analytics, I believe 99% of sites using Google. When it goes
99.9.
yeah. When it goes about marketing, again, Google. When it goes about reports, some ERP. So every merchants need to really estimate and see whether whether the merchant need what like Adobe proposes. And I believe they definitely gonna find their target auditory, but I don't think that the app builder a builder and SaaS, it's Magento 3 because it's completely different thing ideologically and completely different product. Because a lot of projects still need Magento as framework, not Magento as service. And so it doesn't mean if you have Magento to store, it doesn't mean automatically that you need to upgrade to something different. Because like problematics that a builder solves seems to be different than problematic which Magento 2 solves. They solve different problems. So because not every merchant have problem with integration with Adobe services. Not every merchant have problem with like have some bottlenecks with Magento APIs. Like the need to shift this extension points to upper level because like ideologically Magento is also API, just lower level API. Now we have higher level API and it's gonna be limited. And when like let's say sometimes how to express myself here, sometimes that can lead to higher cost, as Vlad mentioned, higher cost of customizability because no one refuses reality and cap theorem. So you still, every time you need to sacrifice something. You cannot check all the boxes with your framework. Sometimes you sacrifice customizability, sometimes you sacrifice performance, sometimes you sacrifice upgradability, but you cannot check all the boxes at the same time. So you need to define your priorities. What's more important for you? And then maybe do some compromises with other areas.
I want to say that, I definitely agree with you that this is something that would be definitely cheaper than you can build within the process, how it's called, when you're just delivering your model within the database. You also touched two things that I want to comment on. The first one was about the ecosystem, and that's totally right. And I think it started much earlier. It started with integration of other services like Adobe Sensei, and it was even that days, if I'm not wrong, Magento BI with Adobe BI.
Remember that?
So it started much earlier. That's that the Magento is or Adobe Commerce is on one of the, let's say, boxes on one of these bricks where the whole business can be built on. And the whole business is rather the ecosystem of different tools, and the hardest part is to make them work properly with each other. So when you are when your customer is placing order on your store, then this store needs to go to the ERP system for financial relations. It might need to go to the OMS system. It needs to go to the warehouse system. It needs to go to the analytics. It needs to go that's many other places. And all of this data need to be somehow transferred and synchronized. And this is all about the building the ecosystem. And Adobe provides one of the way how you can do it. Because you can do it with Azure, you can do it with AWS, you can do it with the Google Cloud. No one will limit you. The only different that Adobe, let's say that the company who are owning Adobe Commerce, that topology, and they provide a tool that's natively supposed to work with it. And using the app builder, it doesn't prevent you from using some other services. You can use Microsoft Dynamics. You can use also Google Analytics. The only thing that you will need is to build your application that will take the data from Adobe Commerce by using events or whatever, and we'll send it to the destination point where this data need to be stored. And of course, this would require you some investment. That would require you to build a separated application. And this is actually the good question, like what will be cheaper? Is to build a module that will do the job by using PHP, or to build a separated application using using the Node.js and JavaScript to deliver the data to the destination. That's about the ecosystem, what I want to say. And about the business side, so you also mentioned that it's very right that some Adobe Commerce, I would say even not even some, but many customers, they don't need the app builder. Well, they can do both things, because we can grade differently. Like there are some customers who don't need the Adobe Commerce. There could be some customers who maybe can use Adobe Commerce or can continue with Magento open source. There are some customers who can decide like if they want to use an app builder or they want to go old good
or
Magento.
They can do the mix.
Monolith way. Or there could be some customers where using the single application, it's just not the case. I mean, if you have like 20 or 30 developers who need to work on your ecosystem, they need to make your business running, and you have tons of orders, customers, and this is really crazy amount of data just moving through your business. You just cannot use the single application, because I mean it will be very, very complex. It will be very, very hard to maintain. It will be hard to develop. You need to synchronize many things. There will be huge overhead, and in that moment when you need to upgrade the things, and when you have like 3 or 4 or 5 times more modules, custom built modules than they actually Adobe Commerce provide you with, in this case you will understand that you're screwed. You are already cooked. And for this case, just to prevent then this app builder, it could be a better option, because the main difference that if you're building things externally, you just cannot rely on anything else than because that when you're building a module, there could be temptation that you can be tempted to use some, make some preference that you will, need to invest every time you're making your Magento upgrade, just because something is changing and you could rely on the older version of the code. And with App Builder, you just don't have option to do it. In these terms, that's the real use case. But the question is, how many these kind of projects do you actually have just globally? That's just a small percent of the total projects that's using the Adobe Commerce or Magento, and that was done for them. That's how I see it.
So that's totally right. Totally agree with you. So how many projects that would need App Builder are here go running around, and that leads us to following question where Adobe is moving, and I think we need to discuss it with the second topic. But I still have a point to say about the App Builder. You mentioned that we have the external applications, right? We have external applications. And what is the reason why I should use App Builder? Can't I just go to the Max Cluster, ByteNL, or any other hosting provider, hire the hosting, install there my Laravel application that are pre-built, and just communicate with Magento with GraphQL, REST API, or if you are too orthodox, why do you think we should use App Builder in compared to the old version applications? Because in my opinion, even if you're going to use App Builder, you're going to have this Node.js runtime that's limited by 10 seconds of execution time or something. You would still need to have another third-party application running on your own server to store the data, because the App Builder applications are not there, if I'm not mistaken.
No, not only.
You could save the state there, right?
Yes.
Okay, tell me, because I'm not super experienced with that. I want to hear it from you.
Vitalii, do you want to answer?
Again, the use case, but I already mentioned it. The only one case I see is when you require to have better integration with Adobe services.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Other than that, yeah, I don't know. And another one, maybe it's also gonna be dependent on how Adobe gonna support Adobe Commerce, because like now we have SaaS and we have Commerce and there is no clear understanding of how investment gonna be made to both systems. And for a lot of merchants, it is important that to have Adobe Commerce up to date and to have further investment into system. And if they cut investments and just support it and eventually um, discontinue it, so there will be no other choice but the replatforming to somewhere. And yeah, but it's kind of artificial use case in my case, for my vision, because it's not reflecting real life problems. It just upgrade in sake of upgrade. Yeah, but yeah, these two use cases I see.
So the first use case, the Adobe services. The second use case is Adobe will gonna make everyone to use it. They will gonna say, "Chowk out of the platform." Yeah, that's what I thought about as well. And Alexander, what about the stateless? I had an impression that it was stateless.
Referring back to the App Builder, so they're basically things that allow you. It's the first part is called like the Project Firefly, the App Builder. It allows you to host an instances on the Node.js that's instances. Each of these instances has own database. We call it Cosmos DB. It's a key value per database, like Redis, for example. Yeah, it's not like MySQL or Mongo or something. So you cannot store something very super complex and make efficient queries. Just the purpose just to be something small that can still persist data and still can process data. It also supports UI, and it also supports like something called alarms work like a cron job. That's for Node.js. And there's another type of entity that's called runtime. And runtime is more related to the Adobe I/O. And the purpose is to catch the event that can be filed within the system and then do something with it. That's why they have a short lifetime, because this is analog of Google Functions or AWS Lambda. So basically you are getting some data, some event, and then you just need to fire to the right direction and or just change the mapping right to the correct stream. So this basically two different kinds of entities that you can find while traveling within this.
Okay, so no MySQL, you just have this Redis-like, the key value database. But what if you need to store, for example, you're building your own small kind of a system that's storing the data about the customer, the loyalty system, right?
Yeah. I understand. Like this could be even the ERP system that can be integrated somewhere. I mean, so Adobe Cloud. Yeah. So basically here, well, I will start from that. That's the big difference where Adobe Commerce is different from for example, the Shopify. Because I was really surprised. We had recently the project, and it was I don't know how it happened that we started to develop the Shopify. We had a project to develop a payment application for for one of our clients that need to work with payment gateway, and it need to work with Shopify provider native support. And it's appeared that there is a huge difference between how you are building some kind of applications for the Adobe Commerce and for Shopify. Because for Shopify, it's supposed that you will have only one application that you will be responsible to maintain, you will be responsible to host, and it will work with all possible Shopify clients. So like if you have, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 different shops supporting, that's all of your data, all of it from this shop, they will go through your single application. Adobe Commerce here with App Builder, it works totally different. Like you can build an application and it will be like a module. Yeah, you can build it, you can pack it, and you sell it. And there is Adobe Exchange, which is an analog of Magento Marketplace, where you also can buy them and you can install them on your cloud. And with it will have the separated instance. The code could be written by some vendors, but you will have the separated instance, and only for your Adobe account, it will keep the data and it will work only with your account. If you want to build something external, of course you can do it, but it will be the same way most likely as with the Shopify, that you will need to be responsible for hosting it. You will need to be responsible for taking the data. And in this case, I know it very depends who you're building it for. You're building it for a specific merchant. You are building it for yourself as a product you want to earn money. That you will also need to understand, like, if it will be only one client or you need to serve the different clients. And then you will be also responsible for doing our other stuff, is how it will communicate it with your system, how it will be the testing hands, like for a test account, and etc., etc. Another benefit, just reminded that with App Builder, with these applications, you can extend a Magento in UI. So you don't need to write any code in Magento to extend the UI anymore. You can reuse this Node.js applications. They can write a front end that will be visible in your admin pad. And this is really cool because, I thought, like, if you have a closed system and you're supposed to extend it only externally, then how are you supposed to see the data admin panel? Like, well, what will be the place? Or you just need to have a 10 or 20 different places where you can see the different data. So this is really cool feature, and this will be really hard to achieve without customizing the Magento itself when you are doing something externally for the app builder.
Okay. So for me, it still looks like that you cannot fully replace the old-fashioned way of Magento development, like models that you install in the system, by the app builder, because you will gonna definitely have situations when you would need to store large amount of data and do the complex SQL queries to retrieve it based on various conditions, and you would need to host your own application built on Laravel, PHP, or another Magento instance, but that's just a joke. Still, the app builder looks promising in terms of it can handle the events that Adobe Commerce producing, the Magento producing. It provides the good integration with the Adobe services. And it looks like that's not the last version of it, right? We most likely will going to see a support of such things that I've mentioned, the MySQL databases or something with the mesh, or it already exists. If it does, please leave a comment under the video. Yeah, so that's a cool tool. I'm still a bit skeptic about it. I want to see how it's going. That's my thought. Okay. Finally, great. We talked a lot about that one. So, big topic, huge topic. Super small and easy question for you guys. What 5 main tools you use for the development? Vitalii, go.
Yeah. For me, main tool, of course, is PHP Storm. ID super happy with it, and in general, I like what JetBrains company does recently. Really, they improving basically everything. Even as I'm working partially as a plugin developer, they improving environment for developers. They sharing IDEs that were paid before, now they are for free, which is also happened for WebStorm. It's now completely free. I really enjoy their, let's say, infrastructure. Sometimes IDEs can be heavy, but considering the amount of simplification they provide for our work, that's pretty expected. Yeah. Yes, really happy with that. I also big fan of Docker, and I'm using it as my local environment. I built my local environment basically reusing Mark Schust's assembly, which is, I believe, amazing. So huge shout out to Mark. I'm using Linux as my working environment after being 4 years on Mac, and I'm super happy I went back to Linux because it works much better with Docker, and when you have powerful PC, it's not a problem to have Linux. I got literally no issues with Linux. I'm happy being back on and feel as normal developer again.
Okay.
Cypress. You move part of what you need to keep in mind to tests, and it's easier to refactor things. We are writing end-to-end tests with use cases, but it's like different topics, but in general, it's game changer. In this game changer, it's providing an ability for you to do even test-driven development for Magento, which is great. And it's much better than their internal automated tests. It's like easier.
Yeah. Yeah, those internal automated tests from Magento once broke me down. I don't know. Sometimes it's hard. Anyway, Oleksandr, Your turn.
Yeah, so about 5 tools, just to start that I'm working on the Mac OS, I think last 5 years. Before I worked with Linux, but it was just, I don't know, just different companies worked with the different laptops, so I haven't defined it, but still I'm kind of happy with working with Mac. About tools at PSP Storm, it's a base. I'm not using Docker, I'm using Orb Stack, just to found that, the Mac has...
macOS.
Yeah. Just the reason because the macOS has an issue with Docker and with Orb Stack is just working mostly. It's still, I mean, issues are still there, but it's still it's consumed much less resources from the system. For hosting, for local development, I'm using Warden. But that's actually the really big difference. Is you said that you're working with a Marshall's Docker, and the difference that I need to work with during the day, it could be 7 different projects. I just need something to quickly to switch between different clients. But yeah, that's Warden is really cool. You can quickly change it. So that was 3. Draw.io for making diagrams, different charts, and etc. Previously worked with Visual Paradigm, but Draw.io is just this minimum that you basically need to do your job. And the last one, it will be more kind of combined. Let's call it static analysis suite. As we call it at WeConnect. Yeah, the different kind of tools like PHP code sniffer, mess detector, PHP stand. And that's basically using for any commit that contains a PHP code. And we also have our own development, the tool that statically analyzes dependencies between different modules, and it will require you to update your module XML and composer JSON. It's built based on the Magento dependency checker, but we made it kind of much faster. Hope that one day we will release it to public. Just kind of continue pushing the management team, because it's really we'll be happy to share it with community. But yeah, for now it's an internal tool.
Just close your eyes and press the push button.
Yeah.
My turn. It's as usual, PHP Storm. It's the add-on to the PHP Storm called GitHub Copilot, because it brings a great experience in autocomplete of what you're trying to do without thinking about it. Still, guys, disclaimer, if you have no idea how to develop, Copilot will not gonna help you. Just an advice, go and learn programming, okay? Those are 2 tools. The third tool is Table Plus. I really enjoy to use it to connect to any databases that I need. The cool tool. Fourth tool, right? Fourth tool is iTerm. This is the terminal for the SSH. Yeah, it's super simple, but I super love it. And the last one, and what would be the last one? What am I thinking about very often? Yeah, it's a Warden plus DDEV. I'm combining both. And I'm still using Docker in my macOS, but I have no issues with that, guys. I have no idea what you're talking about. It works perfectly fine, unless the mutagen is dead. Yeah, but otherwise, everything works fine. Cool then. Let's move on to the following topic, which is tightly coupled with the Adobe App Builder one, the previous one, and it's Adobe SaaS. But I would like to discuss here not only this news from Adobe that they're going SaaS, but how it's getting introduced into the ecosystem. What is the influence, and especially what is very interesting, why they came up to this decision. This road from the idea of Magento 1, the Magento 2, and then the Adobe SaaS. And this thing that Vitalii just mentioned, Magento 3. So how will it gonna build up the Magento 3 in total?
Okay, I'm actually a SaaS developer now because we have our ERP system in current project on SaaS, and comparing SaaS development experience, it's Oracle NetSuite, maybe some of you know it. So, and comparing SaaS experience and like Magento 2 experience, development experience, I would say as a developer, I prefer Magento. Why I prefer Magento? First of all, ease of data patching. We have data patches in Magento, so we can code any like CMS change, any attribute change, anything we want. We can code it and share among your team. We can deploy it and everything gonna be fine. You don't have such a thing as deployment steps. So
okay. So you don't need to manually go to the back office of SaaS and do things.
Yes, there is a problem. Sometimes those deployment steps are being either misinterpreted or just forgotten to follow. When we automate things, we are trying to eliminate human factor as more as possible. With SaaS experience, it's not always the case. Another issue is, let's say you have your changes on your local system right away. You don't need to deploy anything. You don't need to transfer files, refresh, and so on. So yeah, ease of development when you have your project locally is way better. But Magento SaaS is not here, and it's hard to judge how it's gonna look and which way of patching is gonna provide. Obviously, we're not gonna have ability to patch PHP code directly, which has its, as you mentioned, pros and cons. Pros is gonna lead to ease of upgrades, yes, but yeah, extensibility gonna be suffering. And again, let's say extensibility, right? Because now it's not customizability, it's going to be extensibility. And when it goes about highly customizable B2B stores, sometimes, yeah, you need to have more code, not less in this case. So in general, it's hard to judge now. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, everything going to be dependent on implementation. Yeah. But I believe NetSuite SaaS, it's well flexible, well developed, and you can implement literally anything you want there. Extends form, extend grid. It has very flexible reports, and it also has events. You can upload your scripts to this event, attach them, and perform some actions.
That's the remote code execution, mate.
Yeah. And
Security.
I just don't know. It seems like the SaaS implementation going to be different because we have a builder. Kind of, let's see. It's hard to tell. But in general, I prefer not SaaS. As a developer, I prefer not SaaS.
Every developer will go and say that because the SaaS taking the job from you.
Let's mention this thing. As developer, interested, it's like conflict of interest between merchants and developers. We are up to update all the time, everything. Like we have a new way. Okay, great. Let's re-implement
20 hours.
Yeah. We're gonna have a job for next 2 years. This is great. And as developer, I'm super happy with new approaches and so on. But what's the return of investment? It's hard to tell. Maybe for new project, it's not gonna be big of concern because what difference? You still need to write something. But for old one, it's really doubtful. About return of investment and
on investments, yeah.
platform and so on. So let's see. I don't know. It's not here. It would be great to tell several months after they release it and someone of us touches it. At least I believe chances are really low that it's gonna be me because I'm working on only one project now and we don't have plans of refactoring. But let's see what guys from agency says.
Okay, so let me sum up what you just talked about. The context: Adobe told that we are moving Magento to SaaS, and Magento developers, Adobe Commerce developers world, and the merchants were like, "Wow, okay, that's interesting." And because we already have the Shopify that is fully SaaS, and it felt from the start that Adobe is trying to compete with the Shopify. Yeah, but the more I'm trying to think about this topic, and the more I'm researching the information, where it looks like they are shooting the different segment of the merchants, and they will gonna definitely use the different approaches, similar from technical point of view, but different from the business point of view. And I totally share your concerns about return on investments here. That's again back into the topic about the App Builder. Do you need it? Maybe you definitely not need it, or maybe you need, maybe no. And there will be a list of things that you need to check before you make this decision, because that will not be easy for your development team and for you to pay, because I believe that will be costly. A bit costlier than the Shopify, I think, the Adobe. Yeah. And also from developer perspective, I would say that I'm also not super fan of SaaS because they're taking my job. But I would say we will have a lot of other services that we're gonna build in order to work with the Adobe SaaS. We're gonna have a job, definitely. maybe less of a code base, but more of the figuring out how the data flow will be built from the point A to point B and to SaaS. But we're gonna definitely have a job to do. Merchants, don't be so happy. You would need to pay us as well.
Moreover, I have remarked here because maybe it's misinterpreted. I think opposite. It's gonna lead for more work for developer, not less. Not less. Because more code gonna be needed to be written, not less.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a highly customizable store. So let's see how it goes, but I believe it's gonna lead to more work. It's never been a concern for me because it would be hypocritical as we as developer taking other people's jobs, automating things. So we deserve it the most to be replaced. So that would be fair.
Okay, Mr. Cypress developer taking jobs from the quality assurance engineers.
Yeah.
So let me adjust my statement. Merchants, if you go with SaaS, you pay more to every party. At least that's what I think about. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, let's see.
Alexander, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I'm thinking also from the angle of the reason why it happened. And I just thought that the long way out, probably it will be the long story. So you remember this Magento 1 days, yeah, when it was like everybody happy doing them stores on Magento, and it was so, let's call it vital, it's not vital, it's resilient, because you can write the really bad code, do bad stuff there, and it's still continue working. And I think it was really the greatest benefits of running store on Magento 1, that it can survive in almost any conditions. But
it's still surviving. There is a lot of merchants using still Magento 1.
Yeah. That's also true. The reason. But when you try to upgrade it, oh my, that was really a disaster. Especially, I just remember this old good video from Ben Marks, who 2 minutes told you that you should not change your Magento core.
Yeah,
don't change the core.
Don't change the core.
Don't change the core.
Yeah, it was funny video, but what was really a disaster when you need to upgrade your Magento 1. In Magento 2, they made it, let's say, less resilient, because, when you run in Magento 2, it still need to pass some compilation, it still need to deploy some static content, etc. So it's, making it more narrow for the using of the platform, and it would require you higher quality. But they also introduced the concept of contracts, of service contracts, right? So it's also known as APIs. And it told you, like, these things that we are promising, we won't change. Other things we can change. We won't change it within the not my release. And it was really cool because it's just showed your roadmap. That's when you can extend things, when you can use these things, and which things you should avoid using because you need to pay extra to maintain it. But that happened. I think that's almost everybody ignored it. Of course, with the time that more and more people started to pay attention to it. But in the very beginning, Magento 2 was really, the wow scream in the community that it's so hard to upgrade Magento. There's a lot of issues, a lot of hours spent. And yeah, it was really a disaster. And the main reason was disaster, just that because people misuse things. People are extended things wrong, they work it with the platform wrong. Of course, it was obvious because it was not enough experience. After 6 or 7 years of experience, you see these things more clearly. But at the beginning, it was really very easy to make things wrong. And there's also another thing that Adobe bought Magento, and it's, just the popularity of the platform just skyrocketed. Because even before it was just a big company Magento, now it's a giant, it's a whale. The whale market that's bought the Magento, and big businesses also started to pay attention to see it as an opportunity that can use it. And it also led that the more customizations, more like heavy customizable stores appeared in the market, which also resulted that more developers came to the market. Some of them knew, some of them haven't worked with Magento, they just know the basics of the PHP or whatever, but they still kind of had a lot of work to do on Magento, and it resulted that the quality become much lower than it should be. And yeah, at the end, like, why I'm not leading it, the upgrades were really a huge disaster, and mainly because people have an option to use Magento wrong. And even if I'm using Magento wrong, when my site is broken after upgrade, I will say, like, Adobe sucks because they should see, yeah, they should, foreseen that I will use this thing, and whatever, if they told me don't use this thing, they still should keep it compatible. And I also remember from back in the days of community maintaining, it was really a huge topic of backward compatibility. That also made a really huge impact on the how Magento platform was developed. Because whatever you're doing, you should, like, if you are changing the code, you contributed, you should keep things backward compatible. So if anyone after you roll your code will upgrade their Magento, it should continue running. Whatever it was written, what is a service contract, what is not, it still kind of should support that all possible ways for customizations. At the end, it's made really very complex and expensive and time-consuming for Adobe itself to develop things on the Magento. And for merchants and agencies, it makes a disaster to upgrade this project. And SaaS, it seems to be a kind of solution where you can just see Magento, or no, not Magento, Adobe. In this case, it's only Adobe. AC. Adobe Commerce as a black box. So you can access only to the API. So if before you can choose Magento because it's allow you to extend it in all possible ways you want, now you are like preferably choosing SaaS because it has an API that you need for your business. And so in these terms, we can tell like that's the Adobe Commerce SaaS, it's an antagonist, or Magento open source is an antagonist of Adobe Commerce SaaS. Because in the case with Magento open source, you can only extend it within. With Adobe Commerce SaaS, you can extend it only out of the platform with App Builder. So this is kind of the, that's two totally edges of this, how you can work with Magento, Adobe, whatever, this e-commerce platform, this great e-commerce platform I want to mention. And yeah, it's where it depends like where you want to be. Because I also understand that for some merchants, for some businesses, it might not work. If you need to, yes, Vitalii mentioned that if you need to customize something very deeply within the process, that can result that sometimes you just need to rewrite the whole process. And if you need to rewrite the whole process, like you just don't need to have it SaaS. Maybe it will be much easier to use the regular Adobe Commerce, customize what you need, and that will be it. Of course, it will be some...
Or you could build your own process on the side, but most likely, that will be a little bit, a bit more expensive.
You won't pay for, you will pay much less for maintaining the Adobe Commerce, but you will pay more for maintaining the solution that you build
Definitely. Yes.
That's also another thing that, that's this kind of the switch in responsibility. If your site was breached, you cannot tell like it was breached because Magento. No, because Adobe Commerce, because you're using it SaaS. So most likely something was wrong in your customizations.
So actually, you raised a great topic about the upgradability of the system and how it was a disaster in Magento 1, how it went better on Magento 2, not from the start, but it went better, then it went down again because there were a lot of agencies that had no idea how to work with the Magento 2. And Runners Root actually gained a lot of clients with the messed up platforms and made something that you, Vitalii, super like, making the legacy project the great project. And the SaaS partially is about these upgradability things. Most likely the idea about it came out of this problem. I totally agree with this. But there are another topics that Adobe is trying to sell us Adobe SaaS with. And they have a point on them. So one of them is the security thing that you mentioned already. Your system will be patched instantly once the security patch is released. That's super great. But to be honest, the latest security patches for the last year or even 2, they were not a big of a pain. They were smooth enough.
Yeah.
There was troubles, but they like 1, 2, 3 hours.
Yes.
That's it. So it's still a question on return of investments. It's also the thing that Adobe is shifting responsibility over your customizations from the Adobe to the customers. So that was the case that we were complaining. That was the case that other merchants and agencies were complaining to Adobe that their system is bad. And right now they don't want to take it. They want to have their own small island of peace and silence that will be called Adobe Commerce, that is heavily covered with the integration tests, with the unit tests, with the MFTF tests, the functional tests. But those tests will not be failing, will be passing successfully only in case you're not changing anything with your code, right? And they're just disallowing you to change anything there. They are saying it's frozen state, that's it. It's covered with tests, it works. If something doesn't work, then 99.9% that's on your side. That's you have built your customization super bad. And right now, we would not even have a leverage to say, yeah, we built it because you didn't provide enough extension points. Currently, the only extension points that will be is the API, the REST API, GraphQL API, right? So yeah, that's what they're trying to do.
Events, sorry.
Events is very important, definitely. If you're using App Builder, which is questionable, but
I think if you're using Adobe Commerce SaaS, then you just have no way except using the App Builder, because it will be just the Luma theme.
And that's another
Adobe
thing that I want to mention. Yeah, Luma theme. And that's another thing that I want to mention, that Adobe is making you to use their tools. They are not saying to you, you could use it or you could not, as it was before. They will be forcibly putting you in the situation that Adobe Commerce here has their own ecosystem, like an Apple, for example. And if you want it to be running smooth, you need to use Adobe Sensei, for example, you need to use App Builder, you need to use many other things that Adobe will be providing you with, and they will become some kind of a monopolist on this market and on the market of their own merchants, of course. That's one to mention. And they will be pushing you and forcing you to do various things. But I'm not sure that it's super bad, because we already have a Shopify with this. They have their own ecosystem, right?
Yeah, ERPs.
Yeah, well, I think the next step from the Adobe will be releasing their own ERP system, if they not done that again already.
They have kind of related to represent some lightweight.
It was OMS.
Yeah,
it was Magento OMS. It's died.
So I have the theory that is getting the confirmations right now. Adobe will going to force you to use all the services from the Adobe, and you will be super obliged to do that. Yeah. And you won't be able to just jump off it. That's why the open source is great. You know? Yeah. The open source gives you this freedom of choice. And but from the other side, open source, unfortunately, will not be provided with the reliable solutions for your specific cases of the e-commerce, which Adobe does, I think. So it's trade-offs, as you mentioned, guys. You cannot have everything to one time. That's my opinion.
Could you just imagine like how rapidly can change the Adobe Commerce if it will be a black box? If you're only responsible to maintain an API, you're not responsible for maintaining the backward compatibility within it. You can just do whatever you want just to keep the responses the same as it was before. And it will be really great that, you can much faster to get rid of all this legacy that was created there from, I think that there's some stuff from since Magento 1 who nobody refactored, and it can be cleared much more efficiently. But there is one problem. That's called everything else that's where you have access to code. So in these terms, like Adobe Commerce, Magento open source, Adobe Commerce without the cloud, not SaaS, Magento open source, they create really the problem that you still need somehow to maintain them. So it can end up that's, I don't know, in some future, the Adobe Commerce SaaS can be something different. Like everything else will be, will remain at bench. So it still exists, it's still supported, but we are not going to extend it more. We are not going to, develop some new features. We are just supporting it, keeping it secure and etc. And there will be SaaS that can develop, more rapidly, because you can refactor the black box. You have a lot of external services that you can add. That's just keeping an API. That's basically the only reason you need to bother you. And another thing is it really doesn't make sense to compare that Magento SaaS with the Shopify, just because the Shopify in most cases you have access only to the admin panel. Developing anything on Shopify it's very expensive, and yes, it's only it's SaaS, so you basically need to build it in the more generic way. I cannot just imagine if you want to
have the API. Shopify has an API.
Yeah, it has an API, but for example, I don't know, if you want to have an integration with some payment method that's nobody built with, you just need to build the whole process. You need to build an extension. You need to integrate it with the payment gateway. You need to pass 1 million reviews, and you need to comply to the policies of Shopify. And you will spend like 100 hours just to make your work with the payment method that you need.
But I think that there are definitely applications that you can install there. The application from the Shopify store to install and use it.
True, indeed, and you can do the same with Adobe Commerce, and you can do it, but it's terms of the App Builder, so it will be somewhere in your Zeppelin, as I mentioned. Yes, it will be somewhere in your cloud. That's the space in the cloud.
You say the Zeppelin. I remember the story that it burned down, mate.
I just didn't find anything better to compare it with. Yeah, it's still in the clouds, but yeah, you have control it with. Let's keep this part at burning out. Yeah, and with Adobe Commerce, you have the same way that you can install extensions. Moreover, you can develop extensions with App Builder that you need only to maintain for yourself. So it will be only something that you do only for your own, for your merchant's ecosystem, and you don't need to think about anybody else who will be able to see it or install it. So it's still very different kinds of work required, that just a different platform and approaches that you need to work with the Shopify in comparison with Adobe Commerce, even in a SaaS edition. My personal opinion that the best thing is the Adobe Commerce Cloud with option to App Builder, because if you see that something that can be done within your monolith, and it's see that it won't be required to spend a lot of effort to maintain it. It will be more efficient to do it within the process than out of the process. Then you can just do it in this way. If you see that something that will be really hard to maintain in the future with every upgrade, but you can move it somewhere for the external application, even if it will be still costly, you can just compare, because you have choice. You can just compare things. So I think for merchants and for developers, Adobe Commerce, just things as they were before, and also Adobe Commerce SaaS, they are more kind of better from terms of return of investments.
We'll see.
You'll see. True.
How do you think, guys, would Magento cut down the open source? Sorry, not Magento. Would Adobe cut down the Magento open source? In my opinion, that will be the case. That will be somewhere in 5 years from now, because Adobe has a lot of customers that's still using platform as a service. They would need the time to sell the SaaS App Builder and everything, and the merchants would need to build all the infrastructure in this new reality. So it could take time. But I believe in 5 years or something, the open source support will gonna end up from the Adobe, and on the option that we would have, at least if we'll have a look from today, that's the major. Yeah, those are my thoughts. What do you think about it? Maybe I'm panicking too much.
I can say that, well, in general, I would say that Adobe would like to stop supporting the Magento open source. And I think that they really tried. If you remember that a few years ago, there was an announcement like, Magento now Adobe Commerce, so just forget about the Magento. And it's right at the wave of protests from the community, because like a lot of people who spend, I think in total that tens thousands hours, just fixing issues, because everybody remember like Magento 2.0, it was so buggy, there was so many issues, and people, like, of course, with the coordination from Magento community engineering, but still that the people invested a lot of their time just to make things better, because, like once I fix it, this issue, then everybody else, and me included, or my company or my team, they won't face these issues anymore in the future releases. So people understood this, people invested things, people invested their time, and then Adobe said like, well, there is no Magento anymore. Welcome Adobe Commerce. So yeah, then they believed those days that Magento open source, OS, was started. Yeah, this is a kind of circumbreaker in case of Adobe decided to switch off the Magento. Then there will be always a backup if you can use the Magento OS. But in this terms, I don't really see that Adobe can do it now or in any kind of the nearest future. because it will be the really damage for themselves, just because the huge community, and switching things like this, you cannot do it. So even for this reason, for them, the smaller evil is to keep spending money, making some activities, like that there is still people who are checking pull requests, still people who are trying to run the contribution process.
Can I do replic? So they
Yes.
care about merchants because what we consider a community, because like developers we are just executors, so what merchants need we just develop it. So I don't think we have huge impact on directions Magento or Adobe takes, but merchant they do. And if a lot of merchants will gonna migrate right away from Adobe Commerce to new SaaS platform, and there will be not much projects remaining on Adobe Commerce, of course they're gonna shut down it, but the chance is gonna happen like estimated. I personally estimate it as low, so I believe everything gonna be live like at least for 10 years.
Okay, 10 years.
Yeah.
So my estimate 5, your 10.
Yeah, because remember Luma should be discontinued, should have been discontinued
Like a catalog inventory.
and it's
Like
still
inventory,
lives,
yeah.
and it still serves its purpose. And even my project is on Luma, and we are quite happy with it. And to be honest, I don't really think we need to migrate to something else now.
Yeah, but that's the point that Vitalii actually highlighted, that they were trying to sell, that this is kind of the dollar vote, yeah? If they are the merchants, and merchants that see that this is something that they can invest into, to having the store on Magento open source, and they have money, then it will continue living, because they cannot just, switch it off without losing the merchants and scaring their other clients and preventing other merchants to buy Adobe Commerce.
We talked about the Adobe SaaS. That was a lot of thoughts, and I hope you will gonna find something interesting for you from this talk, especially the merchants, because that's your money, that's your decisions. Consequences that you will gonna handle. I believe we have talked about many topics on this podcast. We need to wrap up. Stay tuned. We're gonna post more videos, and we will be definitely answering your questions. Leave your questions in the comment section. We'll be happy to help you out. Thank you and ciao.
Thank you.
Bye.